Okay, here it goes. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. It's our All Things Latin America episode. I have a new playlist with all of the episodes I've done on Latin American countries and countries within that region. And it's another one of our All Things Brazil. And who better to have that than our two-time past guest, Marialva Lima, who's an English teacher based in Sao Paulo, and yeah, we're here to talk about what recently took place in Brazil. Lula managed to win, thank God. He won his second round election against the fascist Bolsanaro, and yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to do an election autopsy and see where does the Latin American left, particularly in Brazil, go from here. So, Marialva, first of all, thank you so much for coming back on the program.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's really nice to be here with happy news, right? Because we are all relieved that we have managed to get rid of that awful creature, because that man is despicable.
So exactly.
We are really
it's funny, and it's funny. Bolsonaro,
him. And of course, Lula achieved something extraordinary, becoming president for a third term. But most Brazilians would agree that, yay, we got rid of the horrible man. So yeah, that's what we are happy about.
And yes, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. But but before I get to my first official question, yes. So the second round of voting, Lula and the PT won by just a thin margin. Before we get into the political makeup,
it was close. We were sweating, apprehensive, but
and before we get into the political makeup of of the Senate, and the Congress, let me read out loud. Let me get your reaction to this. So Paul J of analysis.news. No, it was Gregory Wilpert, of the analysis.news. This is the headline: Lula wins in Brazil, but will have to tread very carefully. And it says here, a sector of Brazil's elites became so disenchanted with Bolsonaro, they switched to supporting Lula. But now Lula cannot afford to pursue a more radical program, since those elites would oust him, just as they did with Dilma Rousseff in 2016. This was said by a Sao Paulo-based writer, Alex. I'm going to be butchering his name. Huchili, and this was before Bolsonaro, conceded defeat, didn't really concede defeat. But anyways, what's your response to that description of what recently took place in Brazil with Lula's victory?
I think it's reasonable, because what happens is these elections have been really different from everything that happened before in Brazil for different reasons. Number one, on Bolsonaro's side, you have Nazi, fascist, people who wanted to, destroy democracy.
Safe to say, a basket of deplorables.
People, the most despicable humans that you can imagine are with him. Okay, were with him and are still with him. And on the other hand, you had leftists who traditionally supported Lula and PT throughout these decades, but you also had more democratic liberals who understood the emergency and the threat that the far right movement represents to democracy. So fascism or democracy, that was the choice. So the most democratic liberals joined forces and voted for Lula. It doesn't mean that they support a more left-wing social program. Of course, it is true. But at the same time, this government, and over the past 2 weeks, the vice president elected Geraldo Alckmin has been conducting what they call a transition team.
Lula's vice president, or
Lula's vice president, yes.
Okay.
Lula's vice president, Geraldo Alckmin, has been conducting a team of transition, because here in Brazil, the constitution, I don't know how it is in other countries, but here, after elections, the next president will take office on the first week of January. So they have to conduct a transition with teams to organize the budget and everything. And the people who have been gathered to be part of this transition team are a mix of social democrats, democratic liberals, and leftists. So it's a wide, a broad group of people, just to give us an idea of how this government is not going to be the left government that we socialists expect, but it's not going to be so liberal as the liberals expect. So it's going to be a more balanced, that's what everyone is talking about. Lula hasn't announced the ministers yet. Everyone has been speculating, but at the moment, the transition teams are these people that represent different groups from society. For example, Lula has mentioned that he's going to have for the first time a ministry for the indigenous people. And everyone is excited because there are some leaders of the indigenous population that people admire that could be in this ministry. This is a huge victory for a marginalized population. So this is a huge deal in this aspect. On the other hand, we also have some issues because the budget that the despicable Bolsanaro left does not include any money for anything. He has destroyed the budget. He has robbed billions. So there is no money for the budget in 2023. Yes, that's it. So now the transition are trying, exactly. When we say he's despicable, he's despicable. Now this transition team is trying to negotiate with the lawmakers how to implement some important aspects of the new government agenda. For example, they have three important aspects that they have made it public, and that's why people voted for them. For example, Lula has mentioned that here in Brazil, let me just remember the name. It's like a fund that was created during the pandemic to support low-income people. So it's like a small amount of money. I remember that Joe Biden gave a check in the US. I don't remember the name, but it's like a
sort of a very minor COVID relief for.
Yes, so it's like a relief fund. So this is what we call here like auxílio, support, but it's like a relief fund for low-income people, which is like 600 reais. So it's like very little. And 150 reais for the mothers who have children under the age of 6. So this is like a relief fund that they are trying to negotiate. This is for the individual, but they are talking about like, I think 150 billions total, the total relief fund, and they are trying to negotiate this. This is one aspect. The other aspect is something that we call popular drug program, like drug medication program. For example, here in Brazil, we used to have during Lula's and Dilma's government diabetes medication, high blood pressure medication, and some other essential medication for free for the population.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, and it is called like popular pharmacy. Like there was a list of medication that people would get for free, and of course, Temer and Bolsonaro like destroyed this free medication plan, and now Lula wants to reinstate this. So this is the second aspect of the agenda, and the third one I don't remember, but there are two fronts. Sorry, I can't remember. It's like the relief fund, and the starvation. Like he wants to end starvation. And
Okay.
like yesterday, he was giving a talk, and he started crying because he said, I cannot believe that I once ended poverty, and now I have to come back again and start all over again and end like starvation, not poverty, starvation. Because it is not acceptable that a country this size cannot feed their people. Wow. And then many people from the finance market were like, oh, but he's going to break the fiscal, the taxes, and then like we on the internet, we were commenting, yes, but the market didn't say anything when Bolsonaro destroyed the country, when Bolsonaro approved their secret budget, when Bolsonaro was sitting idly when 700,000 of people died. But now that Lula is talking about ending starvation, then the financial market people are like, oh, where is the money going to come from? Because they put profit over people. And Lula, no, he puts people over profit. So, of course, there are these complex issues connected to what this guy said. The elite is always like, oh, but where is this money going to come from? But there is enough money. We just need to see how they are going to come up with this agreement. But this is like the basis of the program. Whatever else, I think it's harder to achieve. But these three fronts, like relief fund, free medication, and like the end of starvation, these three fronts are the pillars of Lula's government. So if he manages to do that, then he accomplished his goal.
Wow. Well, all power to him. I hope it wins. And by the way, I think I also forgot to say, but this is a victory that we should be that us leftists should be celebrating. So congratulations to the
I hope he manages to do that, because we can't accept millions of people starving while we are throwing meat away, like, because we have a lot of billions and food here.
But as you mentioned, it will, Lula will have a difficult time governing, but he's but this has often been the story of the PT party. The PT has never had this landslide majority for them to be able to govern, and that's a perfect So what I'm trying to say before I get to this question is that yes, he does not have a he doesn't have a landslide victory. So as you mentioned, it is going to be difficult for him to govern, and he does have to make some compromises with the elites. But as you mentioned, the agenda that he's already focusing on, we can already be quite, Brazilians can be quite happy with that if it's allowed to flourish and so forth. But
Yeah.
but let's talk. But let's talk about the difficulty the PT party is going to be having when it comes to governing. My first official question is: what is the percentage and political makeup of the Brazilian Senate and Congress? Like, how many seats does the Workers' Party have compared to Bolsonaro's party, the Liberal Party, and what's the percentage of representation of the MDB, the Brazilian Democratic Movement, the once dominant center-right party, and which of the smaller left parties can we hope will be allies to the Workers' Party? And do you think the Democratic Labor Party of Ciro Gomes, not sure about the leader, but the party itself, will they be an ally to the PT in the hopes that a lot of good, mild left reforms and progressive policies can be pursued?
Okay. So
Because
this is hard, but
I
I'm
remember in
going
the
to
first round.
try to, because this is very specific, and I am not an expert in politics, so I am checking here the official answer so that I don't give you a speculation of my own mind, okay?
Yeah.
So this is a Brazilian website of news, and I saw this map earlier. So this is the composition, like the colors.
Perfect.
This is from November 9th, so after the election. So this is quite recent, so to give you a better idea. So for example, these are the parties that we have officially, right?
Okay.
So here we have like PT in red. So some of the parties that are supporting PT, like these here, they have like 2022, like 68 people. And here we have like PSB, PSDB, right? So this is like most, if you think about PL, for example, PL is in blue. They have managed to
party.
elect, they are the opposition. So they have managed to elect 76. So they have the largest number. They are these dark blue ones here. So they are officially the only opposition. The other ones, a part are supporting Lula. The other part is like they can be persuaded to one side or the other. But this is going to be really challenging. What happened this week that we don't know if it's going to continue is that they have been on TV saying that they have a friendly atmosphere there. These are the news. This is what they are saying on the news. Yeah. So the leader of the Senate is this guy, Lira, right? His name. And let me see here. He is responsible for PL, for the Senate. PL is another guy, Valdemar something. But Lira was supported by Bolsonaro and supported Bolsonaro. He is the major opposition to Lula. But he wants to be re-elected as the leader of the Senate. So what the journalists are saying that as long as Lula doesn't threaten his claim to continuing being the leader of the Senate, things are going to be easier in the negotiations.
Okay.
So there is like this condition, because this guy is not going to let go. Okay. But this week, Lula met and him, and they shook hands, and they said that they are open for discussions. They are opposition, but they are willing. These are the conversations. So yes, it's hard, but so far, they all have been really welcoming and friendly on TV. If this is going to last after January, we don't know. But so far, that's what we've been hearing. Everyone is very willing, accommodating,
but are there
the
but are
transition
there
team.
but are there enough smaller left parties that can help Lula out and the
Not
Democratic Labor?
enough, but like there are some people that are like in the center, and they can be
So it's them that we
persuaded.
need to be watching out for.
Exactly.
So
They
that
can be persuaded to support.
so that would be the Democratic Labor Party of Ciro Gomez.
No, not necessarily,
Oh, okay.
because this is complex. In Brazil, Ciro Gomes' party is considered left.
Yeah.
So he is already, like, he know, because we haven't heard of him. He has disappeared. Nobody knows where he is. He doesn't talk about it. He has just been silent. But his party is part of the group of parties that supported Lula. So they are already with Lula.
Okay.
This is, when I say center, is like people who can be both far right or center. They are very flexible there. They go where the money goes. So these people can be negotiated, but they are like some parties that they vary in ideology. So they cannot be really, you can't know where they are until you make them an offer that they can't refuse. That's the idea. But Lula knows this, and they have been trying to find solutions to these negotiations. But it's not an easy task. It's complex.
And what's the scene like when it comes to local governments? Because you're so for example, you're based in Sao Paulo, and Sao Paulo has like
unfortunately,
has like a governor, has has a premier. So what's the political makeup when it comes to like local governments, like mayors and like mayors, governors, and whatnot?
Well, the thing is, money talks. That's the most important thing. And what Lula has been saying when giving interviews is, when you are elected president of Brazil, you are elected as the federal government. You govern for all the governors, all the mayors, all the people. We don't separate these things here. Of course, they have to, but like this week when he was talking about starvation, the programs, he mentioned this, like, my approach to the governors who supported us and the governors who didn't support us is the same. Brazil is for the people. The governors are governing, representing their people. They were elected by their people, so they have to act in the best interest of their people. This is their speech. In Sao Paulo, we don't know exactly what's going to be the opposition, but we know that they are opposition because they have been. So I imagine that there are going to be some concessions. But in terms of the government, governors in Brazil, they have always supported the federal government historically, even though they have disagreements. Like Bolsonaro was the first president who divided the governors, because if you think about, yes, it is true, because if you think about the previous governments, if you think about Collor, Itamar, Lula, Fernando Henrique, Dilma, they always had meetings with the governors on a frequently. And for example, in 2020, during the pandemic, the governor of Sau Paulo, Doria, gathered like a committee of governors to try to find a solution for COVID in Brazil. But he was leading, not the president. The president was absent. So it was the first time. But normally the president, although they are from different parties, they always have these meetings and negotiate solutions. This has been what historically happens. Of course, it's not always friendly and nice, but they manage to find solutions.
Well, you already sort of answered this. You already kind of answered this question, which was given the Workers' Party already during the first round of voting didn't get the super majority many of us were hoping, is it safe to say that remains the case? Although you already sort of answered the question that Lula already has quite a big agenda, and hopefully all of those parties that say that there are for Lula, that are going to work with Lula, hopefully all that goes well. But anything else on the agenda that one can expect that the PT will try to do in the short term that will benefit the majority working poor and precarious workers greatly? So anything else that Lula says he would like to do that that you think is going to be very good for the people of Brazil?
The thing is, Lula is on a mission to end starvation. This is #1 priority on his list. We all know this, and he has the support of most people. Most people, even people who didn't vote for him, understand that, yeah, starvation is not a good thing, you know. Okay, this is #1. Then the relief fund, most people understand this as well, because we have seen harsh reality here. People who don't have jobs, don't have food, like, so the relief fund has to continue. Most people have already agreed on that. It's fine.
And is that going to go to, and is that going to go to a lot of people who do very, precarious, like
exactly
the sort of self-employed people, what they call the gig economy, those who work like at like Uber, or those who work in like Deliveroo?
Yeah, then it's complex.
Okay.
Because the people who receive the relief fund are very poor people, because 600 reais is like very little. It's like, it's the exact amount that people need to buy the staple food for the month, for example. So it is also connected with ending starvation, because like that's it, like really basic. Then we have the free medication program, which some medication are free, some medication have discounts, but it's more or less decent. It existed before, everyone was happy with that. Okay. But in terms of other measures, no one is talking about it yet. Why? Because Bolsonaro has destroyed this country. We don't have money because he stole the whole thing. Really, honestly, it's like 400 billions that I don't know what happened, but that's it. That's what happened. He disappeared. He made 400 billion disappear. That man is a criminal. I don't know. What we really want is for him to be arrested. If it's going to be happen or not, then we don't know. Because right now, the only discussion happening in the media is how are they going to manage to fit the emergency program of the next government in the 2023 budget, because there is no money. That's it. Whatever else, like they suggested, is probably going to happen, but only in 2024, because the budget for next year has already been discussed. So they are discussing like some amendments in the law for the budget, because if there is no money, where are they going to find money? So they need to allocate a resource. So this is the only discussion happening right now here.
Okay, wow, that's jeez, Bolsonaro, wow.
He is a
That's
criminal. I think that's what people should understand. He is a criminal.
wow. And yeah, just no, it's just unbelievable. And that's a perfect segue then to this third question I have, which is all that said, though, given that the Liberal Party and I know it sounds so weird that Bolsonaro's political party is called the Liberal Party, so I hope audience can bear with me on that.
Ridiculous, honestly.
But given given the Liberal Party, Bolsonaro's party, his fascist movement and his allies are sadly, for a while, they still remain a huge part of Brazilian affairs, including in the Congress. What sort of compromises do you think Lula will be forced to make? Because I predict that I think anything when it comes to the 2S LGBTQIA plus community, the queer community, I have a feeling that there probably won't be some big civil rights legislation for them. And when it comes to sexism, when it comes to the Native Lives Matter, the Indigenous Lives Matter, will we see? Do you think that there won't be so much of a big advancement on those minority issues because Bolsonaro's party is still a dominant force, or do you think Lula will hopefully try to push back against whatever right-wing backlash that Bolsonaro's supporters are going to do? And we're already seeing a right-wing backlash with the the ridiculous blockades and stuff like that. But I'm just curious, your thoughts on that.
I think that actually, for minorities, this is a time to celebrate. Because just to give you an example, this week, Geraldo Alckmin, Lula's vice president, started publishing the list of people who are integrating the transition teams. And like, oh my God, we were so excited to see the best people in the country representing all sectors of society are represented there. Just to give you an idea, like, Marielle Franco, who was murdered. And we haven't been able to identify the murder yet, but we have a very strong suspicions. Let's see what will happen.
Bolsonaro's sons.
Yeah, but we can't say that, right? But Lula has called her sister to integrate a transition team, and many other people from the indigenous population, the Black people community, right? So the queer folk movement, like there are many people being represented in these transition teams. And here in Brazil, something interesting that happens is we are a conservative society in many aspects, And we have seen that, like, although 60 million people voted for Lula, 58 million voted for Bolsonaro. But the leftists and democratic liberals usually support these programs for minorities. Even, for example, if you have parties like PSDB, they have never done, like, they may have never been like advocates, but they are not opposition to this. Like, they are open to this in this moment. So I think that actually people are having their hopes renewed about this. If it's going to be like something as good as we need, we don't know. But what people are saying is, this is the moment that they are going to define the future of this country. It's not a 4-year government. Is because Lula is going to be the president for 4 years. But these teams, they are going to integrate the government and show us a light, a direction to pursue, like a more democratic Brazilian government, whoever becomes the president after Lula. So this is the idea. So for minorities, actually, it's a good moment that people can, although we know that we have so many problems, of course, we are going to have social programs. And what we are saying is we are getting back to civilization, a normal government, discussions that are actually about topics that we care about, even though we may disagree, that we can have civilized conversations about. So Brazil is on the way for civil society again. That's the idea.
Then very quick follow up. So do you think we'll continue to see a strong and hopefully united people power movement flourish under Lula to try to push back against whatever right-wing backlash Bolsonaro's movement is going to try to do, or even continue to do?
Absolutely. Because, for example, many representatives of the Black people movement in Brazil, for example, have criticism about the way Lula has governed. And I think they are right in many of their criticisms. They are going to continue criticizing, and it's a healthy and constructive feedback, because things are far from ideal here. But at the same time, they have a government that is willing to listen, accommodate these changes, and discuss how to implement these programs and solutions. We have to understand that we are living, like, we are all swimming in mud.
Yeah.
And we are drowning. And then now we have managed to rise to the surface and breathe. So what is going to happen is we are going to get rid of this mud, of fascism and Nazism, and try to find a way to rebuild these institutions. But we have to be realistic. We have to understand that the challenge is huge, and we are not safe because 50 million people supported Bolsonaro, and these people are unhappy. So, and 50 million people is a lot of people. Like, for example,
there are elements of the oligarchs that still are very much pro Bolsonaro, and because Bolsonaro is a fascist, the factions of the military and the police do, do support him. So, yeah,
it's complex. But this week, I was really ashamed of being Brazilian, like because after the elections, like these people who are more, let's say, extreme supporters of Bolsonaro, they have been going to, it's difficult to describe, but I'll try. They have been gathering. Now it's like vanishing, but in the first days after the election, the first week was very strong. They started blocking the roads, going to gather in front of the headquarters of the army, for example, demanding the army intervention because they didn't accept the results, and it has come to a point that the Supreme Court judge had to say, look, democracy is like this. The person who gets the most votes win. The person who doesn't get the most votes lose, like talking to children, really. And then these people started like praying in front of the headquarters, demanding like intervention, dictatorship, these kind of things. And then I saw a video from a French TV, and the journalist was trying to interview these people, these brainwashed, like extreme
right-wing
Bolsonaro supporters. And the French reporter asked the guy, like, what's going on here, blah, blah. And as he started interviewing, the guy, the Brazilian guy, talked to the French journalist. Oh, if for France, Macron, that president, he's a communist. And then the guy was like, yeah, I think you're very badly informed because, Macron is not a communist. But these people are so brainwashed that I was like, oh, please. There are 60
well, hey, hey, these people
like
think
this.
global. These people think global. The media empire, which was born under the right-wing junta, they think global is communist. And
so in that moment, I was like, please, not all Brazilians are like that. We are nice, okay? We are sane, we are healthy. 60 million people are not insane. The other 58 million are not either. But there is a small group belonging to these who are causing a commotion. And really, we were perplexed. Like this guy who jumped in front of a moving truck.
Yes,
like,
yes.
What was this guy
thinking?
So it's so extreme that we cannot explain. We have been saying that this is like a collective, I don't know, like, when you have like one of those religious organizations that have like collective suicide and they manage to persuade people to do it's like that, completely irrational.
Yeah, a cult like Jim Jones.
Like a cult. But these people were like a small minority, but they were like motivated by some business people who supported Bolsonaro and like engaged them into this fake news machine. And they were like in this state of extreme irrationality. But this is like a small movement. It has been vanishing. Okay. We Brazilians are now not all like that. We're like, okay.
Well,
for the record here.
I hope so. Well, one can only hope. But hey, but hey, under Bolsonaro, there was a very good popular left-wing backlash, and we just have to pray that movement continues to mobilize itself under Lula, because he can't do it alone, and he needs the support from people on the streets and whatnot. My second last question, is again a policy question, which is Do you think there's any there's any chance students and teachers in all in university, and even those in Brazil's version of preschool, kindergarten, elementary, middle school, and high school, will their plight and their daily struggles, do you think that it's going to improve much, or it all depends which on which part of Brazil and what's the makeup of the local government, and how strong the local solidarity and workers' rights movement are mobilizing itself in terms of trying to reverse the cuts and the privatization of both the Temer and Bolsanaro periods. So do you think there's
Okay.
going to be any hopes in kind of reversing that trend, and or do you think it all
Okay.
depends?
What happened during the government of Temer was very serious because he managed to change consolidated rights in Brazil. For example, like benefits for workers, like vacation, paid license, these kind of things. This is complex. And Lula has already mentioned that this is unacceptable and they are going to try to change that as much as possible. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
There is another part of the problem, which is the school. In Brazil,
all the schools, all the
yeah,
schools we're talking about.
yeah, because in Brazil, it's from a federal level. You have like the federal, the state, and the city schools. But in general, when you have like, how am I going to say this? Like public schools in Brazil, under Lula and Dilma's government, they have received more funds than any other governments. This is the plan. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, it is, but it doesn't mean that it is a lot, because the other governments were not investing at all. Like Bolsonaro has invested zero and has even like taken the money from education, universities, like
Yeah, I think
whatever.
just to interrupt before you finish your point. I
Please.
think the reason why the response for me is like is wow, is because I think it just goes to show you how Western left leaning media has not given Lula a fair shake, or even Dilma a fair shake, because anytime we would have, I mean, of course, we heard that they were quite popular, and that's why they kept being elected. They were center left, but not exactly radical left. But I think amongst the Western left, we were so bombarded with horror stories of Dilma and Lula, that we completely forget that actually, yes, again, they may not have been as radical as we would like them to be. They may not, but in the end of the day, they were still light years, day and night difference better than all of the previous center right to far right governments Brazil had before. So when you say to me something like so when you were talking about how under Lula and Dilma a lot of money went into education, again, the response I get is wow, because because us Western leftists, we simply have not gotten that information. It's only very recently, with the help of Orinoco Tribune, Brazil Wire, and to an extent the Intercept Brazil, that we're given a much more objective look back on the Lula period and the Dilma period. Anywho, I'm
And
sorry for
this is a
interrupting a bit.
shame
Anywho,
because
sorry for interrupting, but continue with what you were
no, I
saying
think
about
this is an
education.
amazing comment, because when we talk about Lula and we say he is not the leftist leader we want, is because we, leftists, socialists, are expecting a type of government that unfortunately does not exist anywhere in the world. I try to find, and this person is not there. So the leftist leaders that we have are people who try as much as possible to find a way to accommodate these demands under capitalism, because capital is ruling our lives.
Exactly.
So it is very unfair to criticize Lula for not being able to solve the problems, because he's not a superhero. He doesn't have magical powers. He is like he's a conciliator. He's trying to conciliate. Okay, bankers, you wanted to have your billions. Yes, hanging there. We are going to give you your billions. But remember that there are children dying of starvation. Come on, give me some billions. That's what Lula does.
Wow.
And that's not enough. Absolutely not. But he tries, right? And that's the thing. So, like universities, this is not my opinion. Like, if you count the number of universities, and he has mentioned this week, we have to remember, he said, like, the first university in Peru is from 1520. And the first university that we had in Brazil was like in 1920 something. It's very recent, like 18 something, like it's a very recent period, and it was only under Lula's government from 2002 on that we had university campus open in Brazil. So from 2002 on, so over the past 20 years, you have had a new generation of Black people, poor people, indigenous people, queer folk going to the university and becoming the leaders that we expect for these movements. And they have only been given this opportunity because of the universities that Lula built. For example, he visited a favela in Rio de Janeiro. And then there was many women there, Black women in a favela, saying, I am a historian, I am a sociologist, and I am only here today. I'm gonna cry because I see this and I can't. Wow. Like, because the woman said, like, a Black poor woman living in a favela told Lula to his face during the elections campaign, I am only here today because of you. And this is like a generation.
I think I'm also going to get a bit scary from that.
Who have only been to the university because of Lula. So I don't know if the leftists think it's not enough. Yeah, but do better then if you think it's not enough. Because I think that 20 years of school, not perfect because they have some private and public initiatives. It's not all heaven. I am not saying it's heaven here. I'm just saying that it had never been done before. So yes, we are looking forward to this government to continue these programs because that's what we believe that should happen. So when I see Black people in a favela having a master's or a doctor's degree, yeah, I want to cry too, because man, that's awesome. And if people think that's not enough, fuck them. I think it's huge. I think it's huge.
Wow. And final question is this: what has been the mood in what has actually been the mood in Sao Paulo and nationwide in Brazil? Because you were saying to me that Sao Paulo is quite hostile towards Lula and the Workers' Party, and were you actually, wow, I can't read my own handwriting. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it happens.
Okay, yeah. Let me try to skip that. So what has been the mood in Sao Paulo? And because you mentioned how polarizing, and how much baggage the Bolsonaro people are. That these are not people that you can simply agree to disagree with, and these are people who act on their violent fantasies and stuff like that. And so, because have you and your leftist friends have you been able to join in some of the nationwide celebrations that has been reported in Brazil, or due to the extreme polarization that has plagued Brazil since the coup and the rise of Bolsonaro, did you have to be very careful in how expressive you were with Lula's victory? Have people been having to be very careful have people have to be very careful when it comes to saying I'm a Lula supporter and yes, Lula won, due to the fact that I remember when I first interviewed you, you told me that there was that a Bolsonaro supporter murdered his neighbor who was having a private get together, but because everybody was wearing red and so forth, this guy, this fascist supporter murdered his neighbor. So yes, your response to that, and I did have a follow-up question to that, but
Okay.
yeah.
So the thing is, with Lula's victory, we have been legitimized. So we are all relieved. And then we feel that we have a reason to okay, we won, so you lost, so you be quiet. And so most people are like, okay, they understood that. But we have had some incidents. For example, here in Sao Paulo, Lula, it was on Sunday, because the electronic voting machines, they are quite safe, and they have been audited by the army, by the lawyers organization, by the Supreme Court. Like, they have been scrutinized and they work very well. I think the US should have voting electronic, just a hint, because it was like 8 p.m. and we already had the results. And then Lula came here to Sao Paulo. He was on Paulista Avenue on a parade, and everyone was there excited. So it was a party, it was amazing. But as the week progressed, we had some incidents, and unfortunately, I learned through Twitter that some horrible cases happened. For example, in Belo Horizonte, the capital of Minas Gerais, a student, a young man, and a young girl, she was just 12, and the guy was like 20 something. They were both shot by a Bolsonaro supporter on a Sunday night, I think, or Monday, during the celebration. So yes, violence has happened. We had another incident, like a woman was driving her car and she was surrounded by Bolsonaro supporters, like a mob of awful, despicable people try to lynch her, these kind of things. So it has happened here.
But was there something that let them knew that she was a Workers' Party supporter?
Yeah, I think she was wearing a sticker, like Lula stickers, because I wore stickers. My mother wore stickers, so that's why. But there is no problem in wearing stickers. Like, you can murder a person on that. But some people.
But she was driving
Yeah, she was driving, and I think she stopped her car, and they noticed that she had a sticker, and then they surrounded her car. I think she managed to escape, but there was so we had some incidents in another state in the north. I saw that another man was murdered. So we have had some incidents, but something that happened that I think is even worse. I don't think that it's even worse than killing kids, but I mean, as worse as it's difficult to quantify worse here.
Yeah.
We have had so many worse things, but something that happened is like in the South, the white people who are strongly lenient or to Nazi.
Yeah.
Like it's a huge population. Not everyone who lives in the South is Nazi, because there are some places like Porto Alegre that people voted for Lula, but in general, like I don't want to go on vacation down South Brazil. No, like horrible place. But the children from some elite schools have been posting videos supporting Nazism and fascism. And so to the point that the Jew community had to issue a note saying, look, Nazism is bad. Nazism is not acceptable. You know, like we have to come to this point that we have to tell people, look, your kid drawing a swastika at school is not acceptable, okay, mommy and daddy? And you being a Nazi, you know, it's not acceptable, mommy and daddy. And some kids have been kicked out of school, some haven't, because they are children of powerful, rich people. So, like, but this has been happening. So fascism is among us everywhere, not only in Brazil. So we need to understand
but it sounds like under Bolsonaro, it's become so, you know, normalized. Like, you know, like before, like if like before,
you accuse
people would keep,
of being Nazi, and they're like, is this person really Nazi? Just because they draw a swastika, just because they support fascism, and just because they hate black people and they don't like people from Northeast who voted for Lula, just because they want to, are they really Nazi? I think you are exaggerating. And then we're like, yeah, they are Nazi. These are things that, like, real, actual conversations we have had to have here. So, yes, Bolsonaro lost. Okay. We have gotten rid of the despicable man, but fascism is here. And I think that a challenge from this new government is being the president for everyone, especially the ones who didn't vote for him, and also how to educate people on what is a crime, what is an opinion, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. Because I think we have lived under Bolsonaro's regime of terror for 4 years, and we have forgotten how to live civilizedly. So I think that's our goal from now on, try to deconstruct this. But it's a challenge for the whole society in Brazil, and I think for the whole world, because when bands from Europe come play in Brazil, I see the same kind of talk.
Bands
like heavy
Brazilian
metal
bands, Brazilian bands.
No, from Europe who come to play here in Brazil, because I like heavy metal.
Yeah.
So like when I see, like in Brazil, bands from, I don't know, Poland, Norway, like, you know, some of these bands from Europe, Germany, you know, not German bands, but like Polish, Norwegian, you know, like these bands who play more extreme metal, when they come to Brazil, some North American bands, I see, you know, some fascism there as well. So I think this is a disease that has been going on all over the world. So this is not a challenge just for Brazil. Italy has just managed to elect a person who is openly fascist.
Yeah, and so I think it's safe to say that even though this is a great big victory, some of the people do feel fearful of even showing the fact that they are supporters of the Workers' Party. So it's almost like you have to be very, yeah, it is like you do almost have to be very careful, but at the same time, we have to be defiant, and we can't let these
Exactly.
these fascist
Like,
thugs,
just
terrorists,
to
whatever
give
you
you an
want to call them,
example,
intimidate us, right?
like my mother, she's like leftist, like to the soul. And then today I was having lunch, and she's going to visit some relatives this weekend who have, of course, voted for Bolsonaro. Then I told her, you know, Mom, like, be careful. Try not to engage in these conversations in their homes. No, I'm gonna do it because, you know, I have to show them that we won, you know, and now they lost, and I'm going to laugh to their faces. And I was like, yeah, Mom, okay. Because my mother's like, yeah, they have to like understand that they lost, because she likes provoking them. So she's that kind of person. I try to be more like, I provoke people, but to an extent. So I
But
think that,
yeah, minimal extent.
yeah, I try not to be so openly leftist, but I am. And when I am on social media, for example, it's obvious that I'm a socialist and I support Lula. So yeah.
But I've been you already talked about some of the blockades and this crazy Bolsonaro supporter who grabbed onto a truck and wouldn't get out of
The patriot, the truck's patriot is what we call him. Come on, this guy has become a meme here.
But that said, I've been surprised, how many of Bolsonaro's supporters have actually been very quick to concede defeats, and Bolsonaro, he kind of conceded but didn't really concede.
No, he's a freaking coward. He hasn't said a word, because what happens is, traditionally, when a
Yeah, I mean,
president loses the elections, the first thing they do is they call their opponent and congratulate them on that. And Lula said, like yesterday, he hasn't called, he hasn't said anything, and he owes an apology to the Brazilian people who voted for him, because he should go on TV, say, yes, we have lost, and I thank you for your vote. And when he went on TV, I think on Tuesday, after the election was on Sunday, 2 weeks ago, then on Tuesday, he went on TV, and he spoke for like 2 minutes, but he didn't openly say, yes, we have lost the elections. He just said, yes, I thank for the 58 million who voted for me. And if you continue the demonstrations peacefully, it's fine, but don't block the roads. But this is illegal, because you're not protesting for anything that is minimally acceptable. You're like,
he at least said,
demanding.
he at least said to his supporters to stop blocking the roads.
Yeah, but like he was really emphatic on that. And so he hasn't officially recognized that he's lost. And there are many people saying, like, for example, on Twitter, there was a hashtag, like, in bad English, like, Brazilian was stolen. Like, I don't know if you saw this, but it was on Twitter. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, these people, like, come on.
Unbelievable.
And now, like, this movement is vanishing, but there are still some insane cult like people some places.
I promise. I promise this will be my final question, which is overall, in general, your reflections on the victory of Lula, and overall your reflections on the victory of Lula, and going forward. And I also wanted you to respond. I know we talked about this a bit off the air. We're probably going to talk about this more off the air, but I also, yeah. So just in general, give us in closing, overall, your reflections on the election and and what this means for for the left going forward, but also there's been lots of talk amongst the left. I told you off the air that my two Eastern European left-wing journalist colleagues weren't as celebratory for Lula's victory as as you were, and my colleague Maria, she was kind of finger wagging me, saying that I should not be calling Bolsonaro's supporters deplorables. And there's been a version of leftists who think that we need to have a very good program for the right, and if we present this program, we'll be able to convert them. And I find that there are some leftists that just that for some reason or another they just don't want to call a spade, and there are. I know that the word fascism is overly used and can be abused sometimes, but when we look at Trump's supporters, these are people that have a very, very reactionary, grotesque agenda. Bolsonaro's supporters have a very Bolsonaro himself is a very grotesque man, and his supporters have a very, very grotesque agenda. And I don't think that, and you could get, and they openly despise leftism and so forth. And I don't find that just being all Gandhian towards them will magically convert them into it. Although, of course, we do have to engage with them, and hopefully we can convert some of them to it. But I just wanted your your response on that, as well as just the elections and going forward, for Brazil.
I tend to be as realistic as possible, and I try to read as much as I can in terms of articles, and I try to educate myself. Like, I read the news every day from Latin America, Europe, the US, a little bit of Asia. I don't know much about Asia, but I try to read the news to know more or less what's going on. And I see that the problems that we have in Brazil are very specific to our country, but there are many things that we all have in common. We all face the threat of authoritarian, fascist, Nazi regimes. The war that is going on in Russia and Ukraine, the dealings, the negotiations with the elections in the United States. We have to be careful when talking about those things, because many people are very sensitive when we talk about those topics, even when they are leftist or right wing. In Europe, like in England, they have managed to find a prime minister who is very interesting, the first non-white prime minister in the history of England, right?
Yes, yeah, Rishi
is
Sunak.
non-white for the first time in history, but which is very beautiful. But on the other hand, he's very liberal. So we have these contradictions happening. And we have many countries in Europe facing some difficult moments, like Italy has managed to elect a fascist. So like in Brazil, we have our own problems and they are challenging, but at the same time, I think I'm saying this because now we are having this event in Egypt, the COP27 for the environment. And there are many leaders there discussing solutions for the future. And Lula has been invited to go there. And Bolsonaro isn't going because he doesn't care about the environment. He has never given a damn. And I think that the way I see our future is this. The Amazon forest is a symbol to a future that we all want to keep and avoid a horrible alternative. If we don't manage to protect the rainforest, the Amazon forest in Brazil, in Peru, because we have the largest part of the Amazon forest is in Brazil, but the other countries on the border, like Peru, they also have a part of the forest there. This is important because these kinds of solution matter to the whole world. Like in Brazil, we have a fund that was created by an international group of countries that fund programs to avoid deforestation in Brazil. And Bolsonaro has simply refused this fund and has done nothing to stop the deforestation of the Amazon forest. And Lula has already, as soon as he was elected, Norway, Germany, they have already announced that they are willing to start the fund again, billions of investment to directed to programs that the government of Lula will create to protect the environment. And the reason why Lula has mentioned that we are going to have, for the first time in history, a ministry of indigenous people with an indigenous people, a person as a leader, is to answer this demand. Because who better to understand the demands of the forest than the people of the forest? So I think Lula's victory is a symbol of hope and optimism. Is it going to be amazing? Is it going to solve our problems and we are going to live peacefully? No, of course not. We have to be realistic. But at the same time, when you have Lula becoming the president, European countries saying we are willing to invest money in protecting the Amazon forest and stopping deforestation. And we have the COP27 in Egypt. And we have some people like Marina Silva, who has always been a leader when it comes to protecting the environment. We are showing the world things are changing in Brazil, and you can count on us, because Bolsonaro has simply isolated Brazil from all the negotiations. And Lula's victory is not only good for us Brazilians or for the poor people who are starving, it's good for investments, because we are living in capitalism, and unless capitalism is destroyed, we are not going to find the solutions that we want. But while we are here, and these are our circumstances, investments are interesting, because as Lula starts bringing investments to Brazil, the elite starts getting their money, then they are successful, then as long as they have capital flowing, they are fine. And the Amazon Forest Protection Fund is a symbol for that. But when it comes to what you said, like how people underestimate the victory of Lula, is because I think that people, and it happens in Brazil too, and I have some friends who are more radical leftists, and they criticize the decisions that Lula has been making. And I understand why they do it, because it's not enough. Yes, it's not enough. But what will be enough under this system, because we are still living in a capitalist society. We need to change to socialism. When is it going to happen? I don't know. So right now we have to fight the war with the weapons that we have. And I think Lula and his vice president and his teams and the supporters, the political leaders, the civil society, they are trying to find the solution, making some negotiations. And of course, it's not going to be like easy, because I don't think there is an easy solution for Brazil. The only solution I see is that we become socialists. But talking about this here is very difficult, because whatever you say, people are like, yeah, you're too radical, you're communist. And I'm like, man, I'm talking about starvation. Calm down. Like, people should starve to die, like to death. So hang in there. Calm down.
Exactly.
You know, so, and this, when I go online and I check Twitter International, or I go to groups on Facebook, and I see the same kinds of comments in Portuguese, in English, in French, in German. So I think we all face similar challenges. So I don't think we should underestimate the victory of Lula, because Lula is a conciliator. So when he talks to other leaders in South America, and as I mentioned before, I think he is the kind of person who is willing to talk. And I think anyone who is willing to talk and establish conversation, negotiate, and try to find peace is a good person. So I will choose this alternative anytime. So, but I am realistic, but I'm very happy. I think it's good.
No, you should be. And you know, it's this is one of the reasons why I love Latin America, why I'm always fascinated by Latin America. Like much of the world, I'll get often like very depressed about what, you know, like their state of affairs, but I don't know what it is about Latin America, but every time I manage to either, you know, study Latin America or I look at what's going on in Latin America, my faith in humanity gets immediately restored. And from the African, you know, from Africa to Eastern Europe, from Turtle Island, I'm talking about white biracial Turtle Island, not the indigenous people who do, who do get it. But when, but I just find so much of humanity can learn so much from Latin America, and so much of the left, however weak or strong, radical, reformist it is, can learn so much from, you know, from Latin America. And anyways, long story short, long rant short, but yes, we should be very happy with Lula's victory. So on that note,
I am.
On that note, we were joined on this edition, another brilliant edition of 1+1, our All Things Latin America episode, All Things Brazil episode, with Marialva Lima, who is an English teacher based in Sao Paulo. Marialva, hope to have you back on the show in the program. And again, thank you so much for breaking this all down for us and pushing back against a lot of, a lot of misinformation and sort of half truths that have been that have been made about Lula. And so again, thanks so much for pushing back against this, and have a great weekend, and looking forward to having you back on in the future.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.